other stuff in your bulletin, all right? We are doing this interesting series called Milestones. The different guys that are teaching are talking about, from the Old Testament, were there milestones along the way that indicated that you're going towards some giant event? And there were promises in the Old Testament. There are also events in the Old Testament that were leading towards a big, giant event, but they were real fuzzy as to where that destination was going to end up. They could tell they were going somewhere, but when we look back at it, we can see, oh man, that was a milestone there, the milestone there. And that big, giant event was leading up towards the incarnation, the birth of Christ, the coming of Christ, God stepping into earth in the suit of a human being. And that's what those milestones are leading towards. And so we thought before we hit the Christmas season, we sort of go with you guys through some of those milestones in the Old Testament and see what they really said and how they really reflected what was going to happen, even though the people that were happening to it at the time may not have been aware of it. And so these things are sort of echoes or in some ways dress rehearsals for the thing that was going to take place. And there were stories, true stories, historical stories, that you could look back on it and see how things were lining up for when the incarnation came, so that it wasn't a total surprise. In fact, the whole idea that there are stories in every culture that basically echo the greatest story ever told, the real story ever told, that you can find in almost every culture and go, wow, there's some similarities to this story, to the coming of Christ and what he came to do, God's real story of what he's doing in humanity. But people throughout history they've struggled with that a little bit. In fact, that was one of C.S. Lewis's biggest problems. C.S. Lewis, he was buying into a lot of stuff about Christianity, but the one thing he couldn't get his head around was, because he was so familiar with the stories and cultures of other languages and other areas, he goes, it feels like Christianity is just one more fable amongst a bunch of similar fables. And so, how do I know that this isn't just one more myth that's been foisted? Because they all tend to have this same echo to them. And he was referring to the echo of the myth of the corn king that had to die in order for the harvest to come and stuff like that. And he's going, why isn't this like Christianity, just another version of this? And it was a stumbling block for him. It's something he couldn't get his head around. So he went to his friend Tolkien, who was, as you know, a booming Christian guy, and they had these long intellectual conversations about it that Lewis later recorded in his biography. And it was about that very subject. Are there things that we look back and see that those things were actually milestones? They're actually dress rehearsals. They were actually forecasting of something that was going to come, so that when it did come, people would go, that's it, this is the real thing. Well, I want to show you a little video, and you have to put your intellectual hat on for this one a little bit, because this is a reenactment of that conversation that Tolkien and Lewis had in this video, the clip. Lewis is called Jack. That's the name that all of his friends used for him. And it's part of the dialogue that Tolkien and Jack had that C.S. Lewis, Jack, later on recorded about this very subject. And so for those of you that say, we never do anything intellectual at church, here we go. You can roll that.
Well, Jack, you may be able to wash your hands, but your mind is still muddied. You're not thinking clearly at all, old chap. You're acting as if myths are mere arbitrary inventions of fiction, as if we pull them out of thin air. But what you don't understand is that we make things by the law in which we are made. We create because we are created. Creativity, imagination, is God's imageness in us. We tell stories because God is a storyteller. In fact, he is the storyteller. We tell our stories with words. He tells his story with history. The facts of history are his words, and providence is his storyline.
Are you suggesting that all of history, that everything around us is all part of some divine myth?
We are all part of his story. This very conversation is part of his story.
But perhaps it isn't his story, perhaps it's only your story. How can you know that your story, the story that you believe, the Christian story, is any more real than the other stories?
But don't you see, it isn't my story, it's his story. You're acting as if Christianity is one myth among many. It's not, it's the true myth. Christianity really happened. Jesus really existed, so did Pilate. And yet it is this true story that makes sense of all the other stories. It is the archetype. It is the story in which all the other stories have their source, and the story to which all the other stories point. It has everything. It has catastrophe and its opposite, what we might call eucatastrophe. It has the joy of the happy ending, the sudden joyous turn in the story that is essential to all myths. It has to a sublime degree this joy of deliverance, this evangelium, this fleeting glimpse of the real joy, to which all other joys are but a distant echo.
Tolas, what did you mean by catastrophe and eucatastrophe?
Well, for example, it has the catastrophe of the fall and the eucatastrophe of the redemption. It has the catastrophe of the crucifixion and the eucatastrophe of the resurrection. It has everything man's heart desires, because it is being told by the one who is the fulfillment of desire itself. It is a story that begins and ends in joy.
But just because a story brings joy, it doesn't necessarily follow that it's true. There are many joyful myths. They all seem rather flimsy to me and ring rather false.
And yet this story has the inner consistency of reality. There is no tale ever told that men would rather find was true, and none which so many skeptical men have accepted as true on its own merits.
Perhaps it's just a very well-written artifice.
This story has the supremely convincing tone of primary art, not fiction, but of creation. And to reject this leads either to darkness or to wrath. And in my own life, it has led me from darkness to light.
Astonishing. Tolas, you astonish me. You absolutely astonish me.
So from that little clip, what you can see, what he was arguing is, Tolkien was arguing that all these stories, and particularly the historical stories, are revealing God's big plan, his really big story. And the reason for that is that all these stories would resonate with us when the real story came. So that's why you like, for instance, Tolkien would say, that's why you like stories with happy endings. That's why when you see a movie and the bad guy wins, you're going, what? That's not how it's supposed to be. How do you know how it's supposed to be? I mean, isn't real life oftentimes more like that? But that's not how it's supposed to be. Because there's in us this idea of the real story and what the real story is about and how it's supposed to be, and why we resonate when we hear it, why we are attracted to it. And all these other stories, whether they're historical or whether they're mythological, Tolkien would say, these are archetypes so that we recognize the real thing when it came. And so this morning, we're going to look at one of those milestones, one of those archetypes that's probably, and some of you are really familiar with this, and some of you, if you haven't gone to church much, this might be the first time you've heard this or thought about this. But this set of events that's covered in a number of chapters in the Old Testament is really the archetype for what would take place just down the road a couple thousand years at the birth of Christ. So, story is found in the book of Exodus, and it's a story that has amazing parallels to what would take place at the incarnation when Christ came. And I'm going to jump through just some of the parallels. There's a ton of them. If you want to jump into it, you can start in Exodus chapter 3 and just keep charging through there, and you'll see the whole big, wide story. Or you can go rent the movie, right? Because they try to tell it in that, but they don't do that great a job. But out of Scripture, you can be able to see these things, and they pop forward, and you'll see why they made sense and why they were, guys like Paul took them and used them as their primary evangelism tool. These archetypes that all of a sudden everybody realized. So the story starts out, as you probably know, Joseph brought his family and brought all the people of Israel to Egypt. They were welcome guests there, and they just made their home in Egypt. By 400 years later, everything had soured. The Egyptians decided that this workforce was not to be released, and they made them into slaves. They gave them all kinds of miserable things, but their population was growing so fast that they began to panic and go, these guys could become a real political force. Even though we've stripped them of all their power, we need to stop that from happening. And so they instituted infanticide, the killing of male babies, basically to slow down the population growth of the Israelis, of the Hebrews. Many of you remember that story. That's how the end of what Joseph started ended. But it was the beginning, because one of those babies that was supposed to be killed wasn't. He instead was floated down a river, adopted by an Egyptian family that was connected with royalty. His name was? There we go. Okay, some of you went to Sunday school. His name was Moses, and he grew up in a privileged situation, but was sensitive to what was going on with the slavery of his own people. As you know, he got into it with an Egyptian guard, ended up killing him, and he booked it off to the desert where he got married and just settled down to be a shepherd. You know, ran away from the slavery deal, ran away from the political world of Egyptian politics, and just said, hey, I'm just going to live a quiet, peaceful life. But anytime a person who's a believer in God decides, I'm just going to separate myself, and we're just going to live a quiet, peaceful life, usually God interrupts you in that and says, that wasn't really my idea for you, the quiet, peaceful life. In fact, I've picked you to leave your sheep behind and go in and get in the face of the most powerful ruler of earth and say, I want you to set my people free. And if you know the story, Moses made every objection under the book why he couldn't do it. But eventually he ends up standing in front of Pharaoh. And the reason he stood up in front of Pharaoh is because his people were in slavery, and God saw that they were in slavery, and God's plan was to release them from slavery. In fact, in the book of Exodus, it reads this way, God speaking, Exodus chapter 3. I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Now here's our first parallel. God recognized his people were in slavery, and he goes, I got a better plan for them. I want to release them from slavery. I'm concerned for them. What's going on in their life is not what I want, and I want to release them from slavery, and I've got a plan to make that happen. When God looks at us, he sees the same thing. He sees humanity caught in slavery. Now, we don't have somebody standing over us with a whip, but the scriptures tell us that we are all slaves to sin. By the way, that word is a really unpopular word, just me making that statement. We are slaves to sin. A lot of people go, no, I'm not. First of all, they think I make all my choices. I'm the master of my own, captain of my own ship and master of my destiny and stuff like that. And then sin is a really objectionable word. I mean, in your office place and where you kind of hang out with people, if they're not believers, how many times do you actually hear somebody use that word in the English language? Even when they really screw up. Like, say they cheat on their wife. They don't go, oh, I've sinned against my wife. No, they go, oh, man, I made a boo-boo. A boo-boo? Cheating on your wife is a boo-boo? Or, you catch some guy using your stolen credit card. What does he do when he gets in front of the judge and you go, I'm so wrong. I've sinned against this guy. And, no, he goes, I fouled up. Like it's a game and he just hit a foul. I screwed up. Really? That's as much ownership as you want? Because sin reaches down in us and it doesn't just pretend to be something accidental that we did. It means that we plotted it, thought about it. And if we're really honest with ourselves, every single one of us knows and can look back, and a lot of times it's the thing that wakes us up at 4 a.m. going, why did I ever say that? Why did I ever do that? Because we know we did it clearly, we did it intentionally, and we did it knowing it was wrong. We didn't stumble into it, we chose it. And we also know that sin is really easy to get trapped into and make all kinds of excuses of why we can continue that behavior. If you were married to the person I'm married to, you would do that. Really? If you got paid what I paid, you'd do. Really? We can rationalize our behavior, our wrong behavior, so that it's not really wrong. It's justifiable in some sense. But God looks at me and goes, man, you're trapped. You're trapped. And you're building a life in a boat that you're punching holes in it all the time because of your behavior. And I'm concerned for you. And I don't want you to live that way. I want to set you free from the stuff that's got you bound, whether it's bad habits or whether it's porn or whether it's just your crummy personality. I want to set you free from the stuff that you're doing damage to your own soul by and the souls and lives of other people. I want to set you free because I see that you're in sin. And he says, I'm going to come down. So we're people that are slaves to sin, just like the Hebrews were slaves to the Egyptians. And God himself is going to do the rescuing. He said to Moses, I'm going to come down and do this. And he did. He did, because Jesus was the one who stepped in and he started making claims that he was God. In fact, the reason they crucified Christ, they said, you are a mere man who makes yourself out to be God on earth. That was the reason that they gave for wanting him crucified. And he was quite clear about that. He said in John 12, he says, I've come into the world as a light so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. I'm the one, I've come into the world. And over again, he repeatedly announces that he's come to solve the human problem. So God is going to take care of it, and he's going to take care of it personally. And of course, those in power don't believe. The Pharaoh didn't believe. You got this dumb shepherd standing in front of him with a staff going, you got to let my people free. You got to let them go. Otherwise, bad stuff's going to happen to you. Yeah, get this nut out of here. And, of course, you know what happened. Plague after plague after plague until finally the guy goes, okay, all right, I give up, uncle. And even then he changes his mind at the end. And just like that, people look at us and go, I don't believe that stuff. That's myth. You guys believe a bunch of myth. When it came time for the last plague, which was the gnarly one, as you probably know, where the destroyer, that's the Hebrew word that is used, when the destroyer would pass by and take out the firstborn firstborn male of every family, God, because he cared, because he wanted to save the people that recognized their own slavery, recognized that they were in a condition that they needed to be rescued from, he gave some instructions to them. And these instructions are fascinating because they're parallel as to what took place a little bit later in history. It had to be a lamb, and it had to be a lamb without spot or blemish. In other words, a perfect lamb. And the scriptures teach us that Jesus, had no sin, was made sin for us. He was the perfect lamb. In fact, when John the Baptist saw Jesus coming, remember what he said? He said, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And what he was referencing is the Exodus lamb. Because that Exodus lamb, it was going to be his blood that was going to take away the sin of the world. And that blood was going to be painted on the door sills of the home. And in other words, it had to be applied. This is what the instructions were out of Exodus. They were to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses. All right? And Jesus says to us, if you want to be free from sin, you have to apply what I'm doing for you. You have to apply my sacrifice for you. It's not just good enough to have the blood in the bucket and go, yeah, I know that's where it's supposed to go. You have to apply it. And what that means to us, well, Jesus said it. He goes, whoever obeys my word, whoever always obeys my word will never see death. In other words, whoever obeys, applies what Jesus says, not just thinks he's a great guy, wonderful teacher, got some cool things, and we do pick and choose and apply what we want. But whoever applies my word will beat death. And the saving power, by the way, was the blood itself. Death passed over the doors with the blood. It goes like this in the book of Exodus. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the doorframe and will pass over the doorway. And he will not permit the destroyer to enter your house and strike you down. Christians believe this. We believe it's the blood of Christ that saves our bacon. And that's it. It's not how good we are. It's not how many points we rack up, being a sweet person. It's not our philanthropy. It's nothing. It's simply the blood of Christ. And that blood, by the way, as theologians will tell you, works forwards and backwards in time because nobody is saved except by the blood of Christ. That includes Moses and Abraham and all the guys who didn't even realize that when they were sacrificing those lambs, what they were doing is they were heralding what was going to take place that they couldn't even conceive of when God himself would sacrifice himself for us. And it's that blood working forward and backwards in time, even if people don't even realize it, that saves us. Because the power is all in the blood. And not only that, but those who believed were given a really interesting instructions. They're sitting inside their homes. They've got the blood of the lamb. They know that their salvation is coming, that their freedom is coming. They don't know exactly how that's going to take place. But they're told to dress in a certain way. They're told to wear their clothes like they're going to go, get their bags packed like they're going to take a trip. And so they were instructed to be ready to go at a moment's notice and to live like they don't belong here anymore. This world isn't your home. Egypt used to be your home, but it's not your home anymore. You're going to go to a whole different place. And so you need to live really loosely here. For the time you're here, just live loosely. Realize that you're ready to go. And for us, the scriptures in the New Testament constantly tell us that we are on a journey home, and we ought not get too comfortable here. That our roots ought not to be here, that the important things in life ought not to be built here, because we just leave those things, somebody else gets them, they turn to dust, and we're forgotten about in a moment. Yesterday, I was at my mother-in-law's house. My mother-in-law's 86. We were... We had scanned all these old photos that were in a box, right? Because I actually hired one of our foreign interns that was here because he needed some money. I said, okay, look, I'll pay you $10 an hour just to scan all these because I don't want to do it. It's worth $10 an hour for me to have somebody do it. You probably have a box of photos like that too, right? That you go, I'd like to scan these so that everybody in the family can get them. And so he scanned all these photos, and so we were going over to sit in front of my mother-in-law because we didn't know who the heck half the people were. Right? And we're looking at these photos, and what was really interesting, some of them were like really old and really cool. Kauai, like from the 1920s, 1930s, really, really cool stuff. By the way, we had a picture of all the kids at Kamakani School. Nobody wore shoes. It was really interesting. But, they probably still don't. But what was really interesting is, who's this? She didn't know. Who's that? I don't know. Who's this? If it wasn't written on the photo, they were lost to history. We had a photo of them, we had a record of them, but they were lost. By the way, all your photos, all those ones on your computer, they're going to when your computer dies, and 20, 30, 40 years after you're gone, 100 years after you're gone, they'll be gone, and frankly, nobody will care. So when we build our world and our life here, we're building in the wrong spot. We ought to be like the Israelis, the scriptures tell us, dressed ready to go, holding on loosely to this world. And when they left, this is what happened. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night, the pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel day or night. And neither pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. I find that really fascinating because look what they were following. God was out there. He went before them on the journey, and God promises us that he'll go before us on the journey as well, that he hasn't left us just to our own devices, but he is gone before us. And the way a Christian screws up is stop looking at Christ as the one who's gone before us. Jesus said, follow me. And then he said, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the ends of the age. In other words, he's the one that we look to for our guidance. Where are we supposed to go? How are we supposed to act? What are we supposed to do? Well, day and night, he's ready to show us. But the people of God who start looking, I think I'll trust my own GPS. I think I'll get my own little map and pull it out and sort of figure this out, and take their eyes off the one who's guiding them, end up going all kinds of weird directions. God designed it so that he is the one that we follow. And by the way, part of their journey, they passed through water. You realize that? You've all seen Charlton Heston part the Red Sea, But what happened was this, out of the book of Exodus. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land, and the waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on the right and on the left. Christians go through water as well. You know what that's called? It's baptism. It's the thing that separates us from the people who are in slavery to the land of promise. On the other side of the water was slavery. On this side of the water is the land of promise. And it is the act that Christians go through to demonstrate that they're part of this new people. They're part of this new society, part of this new culture. See the parallels? They're like everywhere in Scripture. So no wonder that the story of Exodus was a story that Paul took when he went to Ephesus, or he went to Corinth, or he went into those churches. Any of those places, the first thing he did when he got to a new town is he found the Jewish synagogue. And when he went into the Jewish synagogue, he goes, "You remember this story?" And he started talking about Exodus. Now, of course we remember that. Of course, the Passover season's coming. Of course we remember that. And he goes, "That was just a dress rehearsal. Let me tell you about the real Lamb of God." And when he began to explain that story, everybody saw how it lined up, and they went, "Whoa." That story was preparing us for the real story. That story was just one that God put in history so we'd recognize the real thing when it came, which is why he went there. They understood because they had a background to that real story. By the way, when missionaries go into foreign tribes, they look for a story that has parallels out of their culture. They look for a fictional story that has parallels that they can go, "Well, you remember this? This is what, in your culture, this is what Jesus did that's really similar." And then the lights come on. So one of the questions is, in that big story, where are you? Are you in Egypt? Are you in slavery? Are you wandering around the desert lost someplace? Are you sitting there, in your comfortable PJs when you ought to be dressed to go? Where are you in that part of the journey that you ought to be on? And those are questions each one of us has to ask ourselves. And then those of us who remember this story, we also remember that it was the basis for a whole nother story. Because it was on a Passover evening, on a Thursday evening, the evening of the Passover, when all the Jews all around Israel were getting ready for remembering this deliverance, that the deliverer himself sat in front of him, and he got out wine, and he got out bread, and he started a new tradition. You notice we Christians don't celebrate the Passover. I assume if you're a completed Jew, you may. But we Christians don't celebrate the Passover. You know why? We celebrate a different one. And that's what we're going to do this morning. I'm going to ask the guys to bring out the cup and the bread. This is our Passover because this celebrates the Passover that we're talking about in Exodus was the dress rehearsal. This Passover is the real one. And when you grab that bread and you grab that cup, it's what Jesus did with his disciples who didn't know what was coming. They had no idea what he was really talking about. But he goes, from now on, when you eat this and drink this, you're going to do it in remembrance of me because this bread is going to represent my body that's going to be torn for you. And this blood is going to be my blood. And he was the holy Lamb of God who was about to sacrifice himself, which is why Christians everywhere, out of every tradition, the one thing that we all have in common, we all do this Passover ritual to show that sin is passing over us. Death is passing over us because of what we are holding in our hands that we didn't do, we didn't buy, we didn't purchase, we couldn't earn, but what was given for us. So will you hold the elements as they come as the band just leads us a song, and you feel free to sing along with this song, and then we'll eat and drink together.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written, and Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. And the cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. And Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me, and you have broken every chain, and there's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise, your buried body declare the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe out of the silence. The roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is the victory. Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living hope.
On the night he was betrayed, Jesus took the bread and he broke it in two, tore it in pieces, and he said, "This is my body. From now on, when you get together and when you eat it, this is what you're going to be remembering. This is what's brought you out of Egypt. This is what's taken you through the wilderness and will take you through the wilderness. This is what sets you free. When you get together, eat it and remember what I've done." Let's eat together, church. And then likewise, he took the cup. He said, "This is my blood, which is going to be shed for you." And we as believers know that every time we lift this cup to our lips, we are drinking mercy in. What we didn't deserve, what we couldn't earn. Passed over by destruction because of the blood. It's our new Passover. Let's drink together, church. Father, I just thank you for your body. Thank you for your blood. Thank you for removing us from slavery. Thank you for dragging us out of the wilderness. We remember. We give you thanks. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, church, let's get on our feet. Let's do a last chorus of that song. Sing it like you've been saved.
Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Oh God, you are my living hope.
All right, church, go out. Rest in the fact you've been rescued. Invite other people to join the party. There's plenty of room on that road. And isn't it great that God gave us great hints of what's to come all through the Old Testament and given us a bunch of hints about what we're about to experience as believers just down the road too. God bless you, church. Have a wonderful Sunday.